Okay, we're going to start by taking a look at some math concepts that will help you out as you move through the week. The first thing I do want to start with is solving some equations. And just be aware when you solve equations, you have a couple different things you're going to need to deal with. We're going to start by solving an equation that has some distributing involved. Now, distributing and equations all have multiple steps. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with one that looks like this. And I'll give you some of my hints and tips and tricks for solving equations. The first thing we're going to do, and the first thing I like to do, is I like to draw a line straight down the equal sign. Now this is going to help remind me of a couple different things. First, it's going to help remind me what's on the left, what's on the right. Sometimes it gets all jumbled together. And the first thing we're going to do is get rid of these parentheses by distributing or sharing everything on the outside but everything in the inside. And please just be really careful to watch your parentheses and watch your negative signs. Don't forget about that negative out there in front of the 2. And I'm going to do the same thing on the right-hand side. I'm going to share, again being very cautious of that negative sign. Now, this is why I like the line, because what I see is this line clearly shows me that there are x's on the left-hand side. There's a bunch of x's, and I can get them together. And because they're on the same side of the equal sign or the line, we don't do the opposite operation like we're used to doing. We're just going to add them together. They are like terms. A negative x and a positive x gives me a negative 1x. Now, you technically do not have to write the 1 in front. That's totally your choice. Alright, the next thing I want to do is gather all my x's onto one side. I'm going to take these negative 3x's and combine them over with my negative 1x. And I'm going to do that by adding 3x to both sides. 3 minus 1 gives me 2x. The next thing I'm going to do is add 6 to both sides. Negative 3 plus 6 is 3. And lastly, we'll divide by 2. Now, it is okay to have a fraction for your answer, and that's perfectly acceptable. It's not a bad thing at all. A lot of people freak out when they see fractions and say, I couldn't have possibly done it right. You are free to either leave it as a fraction, or you can go ahead and use your calculator. If I did my calculator, remembering that a fraction means to divide, if I divide, I'm going to get x equals 1.5. Now, if you want to check your equation, which is never a bad idea, checking will reveal any problems before they're handed in. You'll see if it doesn't check, it's not the correct solution. What you want to do is you want to go all the way back up to the original and put your x in and see what you get. So I'm going to write in here. Over here, I'm going to do the check, and I'm going to put in, I got 1.5 for x. I'm going to try and fit it in there. Now, when you do this, I closed my parentheses in the wrong spot. Sorry about that. When you do this, you do want to deal with the parentheses first. So I'm going to do what's in the parentheses first and say this is negative 2 times 4.5 plus 1.5. 1.5 plus 1 is 2.5. And then we're going to go ahead and use our calculator. Negative 2 times 4.5 is negative 9, and I will add 1.5 to that and get negative 7.5. Negative 3 times 2.5 is also negative 7.5, and that's good. That's exactly what we want to happen. We want to get the same thing on the left and right of the equal sign. That means our equation checks or our solution is valid. So x equals 1.5 is a very nice valid solution for this equation. Now, one other kind of equation we're going to take a look at is an equation that has fractions. Now, there's actually a couple different ways to approach this, and the method you approach it is completely up to you. What I like to do is, I'm going to change that to a 3, is find a common denominator. And you notice we actually have 3's on both of these fractions. So we're almost all the way there to the common denominator. The only thing I need is a 3 on the bottom of this other one. Since it is not a fraction, it's really a 1 there. And in order to get the common denominator, all you have to do is multiply the top and the bottom by the number you had. So I've got 3's on the bottom. I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by 3. Okay, once you have the common denominator or 3's on the bottom, you're actually allowed to cross them all out. We have brought them all down to a common term. And now our equation becomes much easier to deal with. We can't cross them out right at the beginning because they didn't all have 3's on the bottom. So we did have to get that common denominator before we can ignore it. Okay, so what are we going to do? We want to get all our letters on one side, all our numbers on the other side. I'm going to move my 2x's over here. Remember, that is a 1 in front of the x because we don't see a number. And 1 minus 2 is negative 1. And just be careful you don't drop the sign on the negative there when you subtract out your x's. Last thing we're going to do is divide by negative 1. And get 6 equals x. Again, you can go back and check. You're actually going to use the same method you used before by filling in the 6 for x and making sure both sides of the equation do turn out equal. If they don't turn out equal, you got a problem and you do want to go back and reevaluate your math.